Imagine walking through a dense jungle in the Philippines, and suddenly you're face to face with people who laugh in the presence of danger, who treat death not as an enemy to be feared, but as a familiar friend waiting at the end of a well-lived journey. This isn't fiction. This is the reality of the Eta people, one of the most extraordinary indigenous communities our world has ever known. While most of us spend our lives running from mortality, building walls of denial and distraction, the Eta have discovered something that has eluded modern civilization for centuries: how to live without the paralyzing fear of death. What they've learned will challenge everything you thought you knew about courage, happiness, and what it truly means to be human. The jungle was thick with silence, the kind that presses in on your ears and makes your heartbeat feel loud. Deep in Sulawesi, Indonesia, a team of archaeologists moved slowly through the narrow mouth of Liang Bulu Bechu Cave. They weren't expecting much that day, maybe a few stone tools or fragments of bone, but what they found stopped them cold. Curled peacefully in the soil was a small skeleton, arms crossed, jaw relaxed. There were no signs of trauma, no attempts at protection, and no frantic clawing at the earth. It looked serene, as if death had come like sleep, and this human didn't resist it. At first, the team assumed it was just an unusual burial. But months later, similar discoveries began surfacing across the Wallacea region. Unusual graves containing individuals who appeared to have met death not with fear, but with acceptance. The burial positions were consistent, calm, deliberate, as if the act of dying was ritualized and embraced. Some were adorned with carefully placed shells, pigments, or hand-carved stones. Not weapons, not amulets of protection, but offerings, quiet symbols of peace. These weren't the burials of modern Homo sapiens. Carbon dating and genetic analysis suggested something older, something different. In fact, one of the skeletons belonged to a recently discovered species, Homo floresensis, often nicknamed the Hobbit. Short in stature, but rich in mystery, these humans had smaller brains and unique skeletal traits. But the real mystery wasn't physical, it was emotional. Their remains told a story of a people who didn't just survive in a harsh world. They thrived in it without the most primal instinct of all, fear of death. For scientists, this raised a chilling but fascinating question. What kind of human doesn't fear death? Is it possible they experienced the world so differently, so spiritually, so calmly, that the final breath didn't terrify them? Or could something in their biology have dulled that fear? The more we studied their bones, their artifacts, their burial sites, the more it became clear we weren't just looking at a different species. We were staring into the eyes of a different way of being human. Imagine living in a world untouched by concrete or steel, just raw earth, trees, and sky. Life back then was brutal, yes, but it was also deeply connected to nature's rhythm. For the mysterious humans like Homo floresensis, survival meant adapting not just physically, but emotionally. While modern humans evolved a brain structure that triggers intense fear at the thought of death, part of our survival instinct. It is possible these ancient cousins didn't operate the same way. Some researchers believe their smaller brain size could be a clue. Homo floresensis had brains about 1/3 the size of ours, yet they created tools, hunted in groups, and even painted. Their cognitive abilities were clearly functional, but their emotional processing might have been simpler, not in a lesser sense, but in a more grounded one. Without complex self-awareness, perhaps they didn't worry about what comes after life. Maybe they didn't even frame death as a thing to fear. It just was. But not everyone agrees. A growing number of scientists and anthropologists argue that what we re-seeing in these peaceful burials is not simplicity. It has sophistication. They point to the care in the graves, the deliberate positioning, the symbolic objects placed beside the bodies. These weren't just accidental deaths. These were people whose communities understood death as a transition, not an end, a passage, not a punishment. That level of symbolic thinking suggests something deeper spirituality, maybe even a belief in an afterlife. And here's where it gets eerie. In one grave, tiny red handprints lined the cave wall above the burial. They weren't frantic or smeared. They were soft, intentional, like silent farewells. It's as if the living were gently guiding the dead into another world, not trying to hold them back. Modern humans often build entire religions around fearing and avoiding death. These ancient people, they might have been the opposite. They didn't run from it. They prepared for it, welcomed it even. This forces us to ask, who is more evolved? A species that builds missiles to delay death, or the one that stares it calmly in the face and lets go? In today's world, the fear of death shapes everything. It drives our medicine, our religions, even our daily decisions. We take vitamins, install security systems, pray, meditate, buy insurance, chase youth, just to keep the end at bay. But what if an entire species lived without that fear? What if they didn't need to numb themselves or distract their minds from mortality because they simply didn't see death the way we do? That's the real mystery behind the graves of Homo floresensis. Their lives weren't cushioned by comfort. They lived in volcanic islands teeming with danger giant rats, Komodo dragons, unpredictable weather. And yet, their remains don't show signs of panic or violence at the end. The absence of trauma, the presence of peaceful burial rituals, and the consistent care in how they treated their dead all point to a species that had made peace with something we still struggle to understand. But maybe they didn't just accept death. Maybe they understood it in a way we've forgotten. Some anthropologists suggest that early humans like them had a different sense of self, one less individual, more collective. Without a strong ego-driven sense of I, there may have been no dread of personal extinction. Life and death could have been seen as a cycle, not a cliff, a flow, not a stop. And in this mindset, the final breath wasn't a loss. It was a return. Even now, indigenous cultures around the world preserve echoes of this thinking. Some Amazonian tribes teach that death is simply a crossing. Certain Aboriginal Australians say that the soul walks back to the dream time. Could these modern beliefs be distant cultural descendants of ancient truths held by species like Homo floresensis? We may never know exactly what these people thought or felt in their final moments. But the evidence is clear. They didn't claw at life as it slipped away. They laid down gently, sometimes surrounded by art, sometimes touched by hands one last time. And in their stillness, they left behind a haunting question for us to wrestle with. If death didn't scare them, why does it terrify us? We often think of fear as what kept our ancestors alive, that the ones who ran, who hid, who panicked at danger, those were the ones who survived. But what if there was another path? What if there existed a kind of human who didn't resist death, but accepted it with grace? A kind who saw the end not as a failure or punishment, but as something woven into the fabric of life itself. The remains of Homo floresensis whisper to us across time. They don't scream in agony or cower in fear. They lie still, calmly held by the earth, as if they trusted it. And maybe that's the most profound lesson of all, not how they died, but how they lived, with no great monuments, no obsession with legacy, just quiet courage and connection to a world that modern humans have grown distant from. So, as we chase longer lives and safer futures, maybe it's worth asking, are we truly afraid of dying? Or are we afraid of not really living before we do? If this story made you think differently, if it stirred something ancient or curious inside you, then you're exactly the kind of person this channel is made for. Hit that subscribe button, because we've only just begun scratching the surface of what it really means to be human. Leave a comment below. Do you think fear of death is something we're born with? Or something we learn? And until next time, stay curious, stay grounded, and remember, the past isn't gone. It's just waiting to be rediscovered.